Hello and welcome. I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Straight Talk. The UN has accused senior Myanmar military officials of genocide against the Rohingya following an investigation into the brutal campaign against the Muslim minority group. The inquiry says Myanmar's military has facilitated in the murder, rape and displacement of up to 700,000 people. The United Nations is now pushing to charge the leaders of Myanmar's military with war crimes. For Rohingya rights activists, it's a declaration they've been waiting on for years, as Umer Kablan explains.
Criminal investigation and prosecution is warranted in relation to the three categories of crimes under international law: genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
A recent report from the UN has found top leaders in the Myanmar military carried out war crimes against the Rohingya Muslim minority and should be investigated by the International Criminal Court for genocide. The killing, torture and rape has forced more than 700,000 people to flee to Bangladesh, creating the world's largest refugee camp.
I join you today with a heavy heart. The massive refugee emergency that began 1 year ago in Rakhine State, Myanmar, has become one of the world's worst humanitarian and human rights crises.
We've seen where innocent human beings were raped, murdered, and burned alive for no other reason than their religious and ethnic identity.
But is the tough talk different this time? The United Nations has been criticized time and again for failing to prevent past atrocities like those in Rwanda and Bosnia. Myanmar has faced an onslaught of violence since it launched its military campaign more than a year ago. The Turkish government has been one of the loudest voices calling for an end to the crisis. Turkish NGOs are also doing their part to help the Rohingya, especially those who have escaped the violence. Turkey has long supported the Rohingya minority and has played a key role in bringing global attention to their plight.
Arakan coğrafi olarak uzak ama tıpkı Pakistan gibi, tıpkı Hindistan gibi, tıpkı bölgedeki pek çok başka yer gibi orası da gönül dünyamızın sınırları içindedir. Bunu böyle bilelim. Bu kanlı oyun Arakan'da bozulacaktır.
Umar Tariq is from Rakhine State. He's currently studying in Turkey.
I came in Turkey at 2012 for my undergraduate program. Right now I've finished it. I'm planning to do masters. 90% Rohingya people stay in the foreign country as a refugee, and which is not preferable. So everyone wants to go back to their own land, own motherland, but there are some conditions to be fulfilled. And here, number one is the national identity, two, the freedom of movement, and the security.
Turkey is hosting millions of refugees, including a small Rohingya community. Turkish NGOs are also active on the front lines of this latest crisis. Talha Keskin works for one of the most active Turkish NGOs in Myanmar and Bangladesh.
We are actually trying to help in many sectors, from the food security, shelter, education. Especially right now we are focusing on building shelters for Rohingya people because shelter is one of the biggest problems in Bangladesh.
And Umar is looking forward to the day he completes his education and flies back to Rakhine to offer some help of his own. Umer Kablan, Straight Talk.
And joining us now in the studio are Maung Zarni. He's a Burmese dissident and the co-author of The Slow-Burning Genocide of Myanmar's Rohingya, a policy journal published by the University of Washington, and by Selman Aksunger. He is the co-founder and chairman of the board of directors at the Istanbul Center for International Law. Thank you for both of you for being here. Let's begin with you. You've been living in exile, Maung, in the UK for many years. Tell us about the motivation in Myanmar against, or the Myanmar leadership against the Rohingya. What are their grievances for the state?
Well, the states want to annihilate the Rohingya population as a group. So any act of atrocities, whatever the legal name, that have been committed against the Rohingya people, they are committed because they are members of this Rohingya ethnic group. And that alone raises the issue of group persecution. And when the intent of that persecution can be established as nothing less than extermination, the way that Nazi Germany went after the Jews in all Nazi-occupied Europe.
Let's pull back a bit. But I want to bring in Salman here. Salman, the report itself very clearly calling it genocide, that the Myanmar authorities have committed 4 out of 5 crimes that constitute as genocide. Tell us about the legal standing of this UN document.
All right. So the document is providing us the enough evidences that the crime of genocide, crime against humanity and war crimes has committed by the Burmese military officials and soldiers against the Rohingyas. The crime against humanity and war crimes are the crimes that has already been clearly seen by the international community. But this report, the distinct feature of this report is the first time clearly providing evidences where the genocidal intent has been used against the Rohingyans. So the distinct feature of genocide, crime of genocide, is that the crime of genocide can only be commit by genocidal intent. There is a specific intent here. In legal terms, this has been called as dolus specialis. So this specific intent has to be proved in order to accuse someone as genocider. And it's not an easy thing because no government will provide you enough information or evidences about how they commit this genocide or where those genocidal intent has come from.
I just want to bring in some of these for our viewers from this UN report, and it says that mothers were gang raped in front of young children who were severely injured and in some instances killed. This is part of the testimony, the official record. The survivors say that the soldiers taunted them, saying, "We are going to kill you this way by raping you." Mong.
Well, I think, the report focuses not only on the first act of genocide as defined by the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The first one is direct killing of members of the group. And there are 4 types: ethnic, racial, national, and religious group. And then Rohingyas are considered a protected group under international law. But the report goes back to the early part of 1960s when the military took over the country and began to move towards what later became a genocidal direction. And then, Professor Amartya Sen, and a leading expert, world's leading expert on famine, the Nobel Prize winner in economics at Harvard, he said it very specifically, and he said, if you deny people access to food, access to employment, access to health services, primary health services or emergency health services, or access to your sources of food like, fish, like ponds and, like fields, your intent is very clear. We are biological beings. We have to eat. We have to have access to drinking water. If a state like Myanmar deliberately design policies and conditions in which Rohingyas will not have enough nutritional sources to survive.
This is exactly what the report states, that there was a concerted effort to deny them employment, to deny them livelihoods, to basically keep them in their homes or drive them out. And what that has resulted in, according to this report, is over 1,700 Rohingya fleeing across the border into Bangladesh every month in 2018. What can the United Nations or the international community do after this document
so the commission
to hold these people accountable?
So the report itself suggests that the international community should keep up working on accounting those people who are the most senior official and members of the military. So now it is up to the United Nations to refer the United Nations Security Council either to refer this situation to the International Criminal Court or establish a new court. In order to refer this situation to International Criminal Court, the concurring votes of the 5 permanent members is required.
Before I open it to Mong, this is what the U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo tweeted just before or around the time this report came out a year ago. Following deadly militant attack, security forces responded by launching abhorrent ethnic cleansing of ethnic Rohingya in Burma. The U.S. will continue to hold those responsible accountable. What can the U.S. do? As Salman mentioned, if the Chinese have a veto power in the UN Security Council, in the UN General Assembly, what can this report or just a document amount to?
Yeah, I totally agree with Salman when he says, you know, the establishment of an accountability mechanism in the form of either ICC or the ad hoc, you know, International Tribunal on Myanmar, like what the UN had done for Yugoslavia and Rwanda. The problem is focusing only on accountability and justice is this. We still have 500,000 Rohingya people inside Myanmar, 100,000 plus in internally displaced camps that have been kept since 2012 violence, and then 1 million Rohingyas on the Bangladeshi soil living in subhuman conditions. None of us, you or I, will want our families to be in that scenario. So we have over, let's just say, close to 2 million people, extremely vulnerable to further attacks. And so what Rohingya needs is international intervention, international protection. Help. By the time international court arrives, most of the Rohingyas would have been driven out. That is why the
and that's why a lot of these efforts are being focused from the UN, from international players. In Bangladesh, for example, where the largest camp for refugees in the world right now is in Cox's Bazar. Turkey's position, Turkey's taken a big role in trying to help.
International community can make actually can follow 4 basic ways. One way is, as I already mentioned, the referring situation into the Security Council, so that Turkey and the other states in the region can push the Security Council to refer the situation to International Criminal Court. Establishing a new court, such as International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and Yugoslavia, seems to me a not plausible option, simply because establishing such courts is also requiring the full consent and concurring votes of the Security Council. And establishing such courts
so the Yugoslavia Bosnia Tribunal is out, Rwanda model is out.
Yeah, because if you want to establish such a court, you need more resources, more time. In order to prepare such court, establish such court, you need a new statute, new rules of procedure, new definitions. So it requires so much time and effort and also so much resources. Instead, referring this situation by Security Council referral to the International Criminal Court is an easier option.
An interesting bit in the report, which a lot of people probably don't realize, is that the UN criticized Facebook.
Yeah.
In fact, the investigators sharply criticized Facebook because it was used to spread false news, fake news, threats and intimidation against the minority.
I mean, lost in the focus on the genocide and accountability here is 2 things. One is the role of the Facebook and its failure, and also the culpability of the civilian leadership, whose failures
Aung San Suu Kyi has been criticized.
Active cover-up. Aung San Suu Kyi doesn't control the military and security forces, but she controls.
Was she used? No. Was she used by the military, you think?
Well, they are using
because
each other.
She's Nobel Peace Prize. Spent years under house arrest.
My late grandfather, great uncle, was her father's roommate, and I have enormous love and respect for the family. But she has become the most polished, dishonest mouthpiece for the Burmese military, which her father founded. Now, I think my final comment would be, the report also indicts the United Nations as a whole. After what happened in Sri Lanka, in the last phase of the war, thousands of women were raped, the Ban Ki-moon, then Secretary General, brought in a new approach called human rights upfront, rights first, development and other issues second. United Nations all the agencies, UNHCR, UNDP, World Food Program in Myanmar, in Rangoon, they are collaborating with the Burmese military. They are collaborating with Aung San Suu Kyi. This report, if you read it carefully, indicts the United Nations as a whole in its failure. UN is at best genocide bystander. Turkey should be stepping up in providing leadership, call for an international conference to determine the future of Rohingya people. Put together a coalition of mid-range powers around the world to try to figure out what type of protection regime might be established for Rohingya. Let me tell you, as a Burmese Buddhist and from a military family, Rohingyas have no future insofar as this military is in power and the public mind is not changed. And there are no signs, absolutely no signs there. The Burmese society and in all pillars, monks, soldiers, politicians, intellectuals, and the public will not accept and integrate Rohingyas as our own people as they were before. Therefore, international protection is sorely and urgently needed.
Thank you so much. On that note, strong words, Maung Zarni and Salman Aksunger. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Good health is a blessing that can often be taken for granted, and it's said that no price can be put on staying healthy. Patients who are frustrated with long waiting times and skyrocketing prices elsewhere in their home countries have started to travel to Turkey for treatment. The country offers quality healthcare at affordable prices, as Adil Halim reports.
Nuruddin Bendada has had a very stressful few weeks. Last month, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, yet still managed to keep things in perspective.
This is the will of God, and He does what He pleases. I know that for every disease, there's medicine.
His sister passed away recently in Algeria. Her lung cancer was discovered too late, so Nuruddin and his brother knew time wasn't on their side. Mohammed is a doctor in the UK and knew exactly what his brother's CT scan results meant.
My heart sunk, and actually he noticed it. I tried to hide it as much as I could.
Faced with a long waiting list in Algeria, the brothers explored other options.
We searched in neighboring countries like Tunisia. We searched in France. My brother looked in England where he works. But when we found Turkey, we found an excellent choice.
Advancements in healthcare treatments have contributed to Turkey's rising number of medical tourists.
During the 1970s and 80s, many Turkish people went to the US for brain surgeries. Unlike today, there's been a remarkable development in Turkey in the last 20 years, especially in brain surgery.
Turkey receives a lot of medical tourists. Oncology cases are the most common, especially from Iraq and Libya. Cost is a huge factor.
If we compare with the US, Turkey is 10 times cheaper. For example, the cost of brain surgery is roughly $10,000 or $15,000, whereas it costs $100,000 or $120,000 in America.
765,000. That's how many medical tourists came to Turkey last year. That number includes all kinds of transplants, bone marrow, liver, kidney, you name it. But you know what it doesn't include? Hair transplants.
We do not consider really medical tourism or healthcare issues. It's not a healthcare issue, it's an aesthetic issue. People can survive and can live with hair or without hair.
Amin Çakmak has been promoting Turkish medical tourism in other countries for more than a decade, and it seems to be paying off. He says Turkey will welcome 800,000 medical tourists this year.
Like $7.2 billion with the income. We are now number 3. United States, Germany, and Turkey.
He says Thailand and India receive more patients than Turkey, but their procedures cost less. To reach the number 1 spot, Çakmak believes changes need to be made.
The only remain that we have to review our visa regime to make it a little bit easier and controllable, not out of control, controllable, because our council has representative offices in those countries. So we can review this is right patient or real patient or not.
Back in the recovery room, the Bendada brothers are breathing a sigh of relief.
I saw him the first day after the surgery, 2 hours after the surgery, waving at me. that was great.
Now on the road to recovery, the older Bandada can enjoy a second chance at life. Adil Halim, Straight Talk.
And joining me now to discuss this further is Emre Ali Kodan. He's the chairman at Istanbul International Health and Tourism Association, and Armando Aliu. He's a fellow at Istanbul Commerce University. Thank you so much for being here. Let's begin with you, Armando. You've done a lot of research on this topic.
Right.
What kind of services are these people, 760 or 56,000 people that are coming here, what are they coming here for, Armando?
Right. So, top 10 branches to which international patients must apply in frame of medical tourism are international diseases, eye diseases, orthopedics and traumatology, gynecology and obstetrics, child health and diseases, dermatological and venereal diseases, urology and general surgery.
So it's quite a broad spread when we talk about it, but these numbers, again, don't include cosmetic surgeries, do they?
Exactly, exactly.
So, for example, hair transplants, which is Turkey is a huge destination for. You go out on the street, people from everywhere have these bands on, and they come here for hair transplant. It's quite a significant, and that's not included in these numbers.
Right.
On paper, as you said, $7.6 billion. It could be a lot more with all these other services. Emre, I want to shift it to you.
Okay.
Where does it go from here? What more can Turkey do to attract more visitors?
It's very easy for Turkey to reach 2 million patients and $20 billion revenue in 2023. Even if you calculate 15% growth per year, you can always reach 2 million patients in 2023.
We've seen the lira take a hit. That means that the dollar has more value. So people coming from outside, from Europe or the West, dealing in euros or other currencies, might find it more conducive. Do you think the falling lira might have an impact on that, Emre?
Of course, it sounds like the foreign patients is going to have an advantage because of the rate differences. But unfortunately, the cost of the hospitals, most of them are depending on US dollars and euro.
What you are pointing to, and I'll bring in Armando here as well, is a certain kind of service, not necessarily for a lot of people, a certain kind of people that are coming here, 756,000, that can afford these services, which are still expensive than other markets, Armando.
Right, right. For 2018, the medical tourism industry in Turkey aims to attract 800,000 patients and $8 billion US. So let me give you some predictions for future to frame the future predictions and in revenue, I mean. With East Asia as one of the most promising emerging markets, according to Çakmak, as I already mentioned, Turkey received 200 Chinese tourists for aesthetic and anti-aging therapies in 2017 and expects 1,000 Chinese tourists this year, and the cost here is 50% less than Switzerland and the USA.
This is quite interesting. You're talking about opening emerging markets for Turkish tourism. Well, you mentioned doctor quality, and one of the doctors that we saw in the report, that excellent report by Adil Halim, Mustafa Kemal Hemamcioğlu, he said Turkey is 10 times cheaper than some destinations in Europe and the US. Comes down to price, doesn't it, Armando?
Right, you are exactly right. Turkey has many advantages, very high quality of services and very affordable prices.
But it also has competition from countries like Brazil, India,
right,
the Far East.
Exactly. Many advantages, as I've already mentioned. For instance, medical tourists coming from Bulgaria, Greece, Syria and Azerbaijan prefer Turkey because these tourists have close ties due to kinship relationships. So medical tourists coming from Germany, the Netherlands and France choose Turkey because there is a very intensively living Turkish population in these countries, and health services are quite expensive there. So medical tourists coming from Libya, Morocco, Iraq, Balkan states and Turkmenistan choose Turkey because these developing states are very suffering from difficulties in their national healthcare systems. So when we see there are many countries and they have their disadvantages, so Turkey is going ahead and getting reforms, and this market is going up and has a very bright future.
Armando, Emre, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ali Mustafa. If you've got any comments or suggestions, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.